All right, welcome to our channel. And today I want to discuss the Philadelphia Housing Authority and some of the bigger changes we're starting to see unfold around the country in terms of vouchers and the possibility of cash payments to better help those of you that housing and vouchers receive a better way to enter the housing market and not have such a big issue with finding properties. So, as you may know, in 1974, the Housing Choice Voucher Program was officially inducted as a system of vouchers that would assist renters. But prior to that, in history, they ran a program through the feds that would allow clients to use cash instead of vouchers to be able to access the market. Because cash, unlike a voucher, means that a person would have additional income and they would have the choice to use the money any way they wanted, and mostly towards that of rent. Why would you want to do that? Well, cash is an easier way to go out and access the entire housing market without having prejudicial behavior where landlords may not like your voucher or may have some misconceptions or preconceptions of those of you that are using vouchers. And so what we're seeing now is after we've had almost a half a decade to see how horribly the system runs on vouchers, we're starting to see different locations around the U.S. that are offering, on a limited basis, cash to those that apply for housing choice vouchers. So I know we saw an example in a video where I'd made prior to this for Fresno, California, doing that as the first person in the state of California doing it. And now we're starting to see this in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so they have a sampling of around 300 people utilizing cash instead of vouchers. And again, when you don't have a voucher and you're just cash, that makes you like any other person, like a person that doesn't use a voucher. It means you can access the whole market within your budget versus just having to deal with people that may, in principle, only want to deal with people that do not have Section 8. So the PHDC runs a small pilot program there in Philadelphia. All 300 participants were chosen randomly from the city's waiting list. And so far, the waiting list is for the housing vouchers, and they looked at a sampling of over a decade. Now, the households must earn an income of 50% of the local median income and include a child at home under the age of 15. So you see, they do have some, the test sampling that they're doing is for those that have a child 15 and younger, so there is some pre-requirement there. The program works a bit like a housing subsidy. Trying to pay 30% of their income towards housing, then get a debit card loaded with enough to cover the rest. And so you see how that might be a better option, but I do have some concerns about proof or source of income laws and whether or not that would be an acceptable form of income in terms of how different rental properties may look at a debit card and where that money is coming from. So I don't quite know how that works out so far. And while it's meant for rent, people can spend it on whatever they choose. The program is funded with a mix of public money and philanthropy. Now, we should keep in mind that I don't think there's any time soon we're going to see the federal government or HUD itself issue cash because it's strictly prohibited. But I think if enough of these pilot programs around the U.S. were to work, that would be a good situation where we're able to fully roll this out. And that would eliminate a lot of the administrative burden, the waste of money on housing authorities that do such a horrible job, usually managing and running this. A record half of the renters nationally are now considered at cost burden, which means that 1/4 of America utilizes in some form or another subsidies, and a smaller portion of that vouchers. And so as we see a tightening market, raising rents, as we see pressure on interest rates and an overheated or overzealous market for housing, a lot of properties that might have been available for those of you that utilize Section 8 and the vouchers, you're starting to see those properties where they're kicking everybody out, dropping on the market, selling it because of the cost, because they're able to retain more of their investment back. And so the housing stock in America is becoming very limited and very difficult. So we're starting to see a future where vouchers are becoming completely ineffective between both prejudicial behavior and rental standards and the overheated market in which housing is already in, and then a low stock. So there's not much to incentivize this. So I think that with Albering, the cash, instead of having only a segment of the market open to those of you that would likely have a voucher or using a voucher or cash, this would open up a whole market and would make it much harder for landlords to determine whether or not you participated in the type of program. So, as an overall, I think I do advocate for this situation where we continue to roll out test samples and markets across the U.S. to allow people to receive cash payments directly to their bank accounts or debit cards, and they're able to go out and rent in the standard market because it cuts out a lot of the convolution that's required. Now, I don't know how they're going to address housing quality inspections, HAP contracts, and so on, because there's still things that are required. But I think under the circumstances that it's currently being paid, since this is being funded by taxpayer money and philanthropy, and I have a hard time saying that word, Ryan. And so I think since it's paid that way, there's not a requirement that there's a federal intervention. But we need this at the federal level, not at the state level, because taxpayers can be fickle. One day they may want to do something, the next day they can vote it out. And so that becomes kind of dangerous, especially for those that are using this type of payment to consistently afford themselves rent if they're low income. And so for those of you in Philadelphia, if you were lucky enough to be chosen and you had a child under 15 and you have a income ratio below 50%, then you certainly have the odd to be selected, possibly selected in their lottery for this. The one thing that I think that's interesting is that we're reaching a time and age through the system where we're now seeing the middle class is being erased. There's simply no class and then high class, but it's not about class, is it? There's the have and have nots, and there's no in between. We're starting to see where people are living in the major cities up and down the east and west coast, where $140,000 between two adults in a home still not sufficient to meet the rental market. We're living in a dangerous time because of greed. And another thing that I'm concerned about is the housing market and its stock. All these houses across America are being bought up by corporations that are profit driven. And I know we all here in America understand what capitalism is, but it's to the detriment to the people that live here. If you allow these big companies to continue to buy up, snap up tens of thousands of homes and artificially drive the market and its rents, then even those that have a job will not be able to afford this in the next decade across more than half the states. And right now we're reaching that parallel where even those that don't even consider themselves fundamentally low income are actually low income, even the ones that don't use vouchers. And so we're seeing a bigger and bigger segments of America and Americans working and both unworking and on Social Security that simply cannot afford the market we're in. We're also reaching a threshold where we're seeing a greater average of renters than we are actually homeowners. And that's also a dangerous game because that means we're already living in a world where almost everything that we deal with is a damn subscription. You have subscription to YouTube. So in other words, 1% of the time, if you have 100% to give, everything in your life is every feature and thing that you're using, from your car insurance is a subscription, your rent is your subscription, your rent, all these different things pulling YouTube and Netflix. And so what's happening at the end of the day is most people are all the money's being just sucked out of them because they're on a constant subscription because they don't own anything. So in other words, we're living in an America where we no longer own anything. And the reason I'm bringing that into this conversation in terms of Philadelphia and the cash payment assistance is because it's a more alarming sign of what's playing out. And that's where we're almost beginning to live in a world where we rent our own lives, that only major corporations own everything and they rent it back to us. You know, we rent cars. We have lots of clever names for renting and subscriptions, but renting and subscriptions and all these different ways we like to call it are all the same fucking thing. It means you're indentured for the rest of your life to pay a note on something, and it never stops because you don't own it. And I have great concern for that. So now that I've shared my personal views on capitalism and some of the dangers of it, I'll say this. For those of you who are fortunate enough to live in Philadelphia and do meet the qualifications that are required, I'd love to hear from you in our YouTube channel or in comments to let me know if you are a participant and how that's been working out for you. If you are from San Diego, I'm sorry, not San Diego, Fresno, California, and you participate in their cash assistance program, please do reach out to me or my office. I'd love to hear about that as well. My hope is that we find a unilateral way across the country to expedite the process of getting rid of housing authorities and enter into a system where the feds manage directly cash payments or some other form of payment to clients versus the vouchers, so we can get rid of all the mismanagement, fraud, and prejudicial behavior and stigma that comes behind these damn vouchers. I think it would be a much better system of things for everybody involved. Because let me tell you something about housing. Housing is just like water. We're not cats. We're not birds. We're not dogs. People have to have housing. We simply can outlive naked in the woods. Okay. That's what rabbits do. Humans cannot do that. So whether a person made the right choices in life or not, or whether they didn't plan for retirement or simply this low income, does not mean any other human has the right to deprive another person of a home. Okay. That's something we need to look at as morally and ethically as a country as well. All right, guys, I don't want to carry on too long with all my personal opinions, but some of it is consulting. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jay. I am the owner of Section8Consulting.com. If you're struggling with housing or you're dealing with issues with your housing authority, its employees, or your landlord, and you need a consultation or a way to figure out what your rights are or how to deal with the situation, or you simply need help navigating the system, and you've tried every conceivable method on your own, including research, and you've exhausted all possibilities and still yielded no result in favor of yourself to resolve the issue or get what you need, including a voucher, I would suggest reach out to our office at www.section8consulting.com. We worked with about 20,000 clients over a very long period of time, over 2 decades. Not to mention, I've had more than a decade working with nonprofits, so I do understand almost everything that's involved, from policies, procedures, danger manuals, and legislation, federal rules, Title 24. And so there's very little. I think I probably had clients ask approximately 4 questions in the last few years where I didn't have an answer. So I'd say the odds of me actually not understanding or have an answer in regards to any federal program related to housing would yield only a 1.3% of the time, but I actually not be able to give you a clear answer. All right, guys, I've enjoyed making this video. We will be back tomorrow, as I am on a wild tear this week, to open up a broader perspective of the market. I know we've talked about how to get this and how to do that and how to do DIY just about every part of the process. I've spoken at length on how to understand what your rights are, how to administrate those, how to fight back against injustices in the system, including seeking and finding vouchers, housing, and subsidies. But now I'd like to examine a bigger portion of the market where we discuss how the overall market is reacting to those of you that are out there seeking this and trying to use it. Because to understand the system, we must first look at ourselves and our current situation, but we would be foolish to ignore the whole market. So in other words, you can't just simply live quietly in your property and think that it's all going to run well if you're not aware of the larger scope of what's happening. So understanding what's happening to other people in other states that are in their troubles and their stresses and the things they're going through will better help you understand how you should be reacting in the system and how you should be navigating. And to do that, I'm going to be discussing a lot of different videos over the next couple of weeks where we examine the country as a whole and see how everybody else is navigating and what bits of wisdom we can pull from that to better enable people to understand their rights, get housing, utilize their vouchers, and not be abused in the process, to not give up, to not fail, to understand clearly how to use a system that was really never designed to work that well, and the potentials of the upcoming future in the next 10 years and 20 years where the system may be starting to shut down and a newer system being developed that may be a little bit better in terms of service for assisting people with housing. So I want to give a few shout outs to Annie April. Question for the homeownership program: do you have to live in the state and take a class? Homeownership program is going to be, again, something I'm going to cover again. I've made an extensive number of videos regarding that. So HUD homeownership, you first need to establish whether or not your housing authority locally has that program. Not all of them have it. If they do, you would need to participate in it, take classes, as well as FSS. Now, what if you took that and you somehow ported or moved to a different state? Well, the applicable rules would be the same. You've already taken the classes. However, they may require you to take a few additional ones to make sure. So in other words, you don't want to take home ownership program in a specific with a specific housing authority, and then before you go buy a house, go and move across the nation, because likely what's going to happen is the next housing authority is going, hey, wait a minute, different market, different concerns, and they're going to want you to take more classes. So I don't think you have to do the whole process again, but I think there may be some things that may need to be addressed before you're allowed to go forward. And next person to give a shout out to is Patricia. I am on Section 8 in Riverside, California. Landlords are remodeling and damaged my carpet, refused to clean it or replace it, even with a doctor's note. Well, when you deal with tenants, we have to determine whether or not fair use and whether or not the carpet and other issues are related to what you're going through, what they've done to the property itself, reach the magnitude of where it's abuse of the property. So, Patrick, I would suggest reach out to our office. We kind of discuss what your options could be in terms of recovering cost on things that were unfairly used, abused, or even damaged in your property. I advocate for both sides of the party. And just to be clear, I only advocate of the good side of both parties. In other words, I don't service slumlords, and I don't service drug addicts and other criminals that go into properties and tear it up. I only service people that appreciate the use of a voucher and respectfully treat properties and conduct yourself in a normal manner, as well as landlords that don't trample the rights of people. So you'll find that I'm always happy to serve either end as long as both parties or equivalently with respect to each other. Well, guys, I've enjoyed talking with you. I know this will be kind of a short video. We got Crystal. She goes, follow-up question about the home ownership. If your county doesn't have the program, can you still purchase a home? In rare circumstances, HUD does have a mandate within its codes and regulations that allow you to solicit both HUD and the housing authority to potentially offer a short-term program, but that's only if you live in a rural area. In other words, you cannot use that program without an actual housing authority that has the funding to do so. So you may want to do something in an area where a housing authority is, but if they don't have the money to match, then there's no possibility of doing that. That's why checking with housing authorities to make sure they participate works. So I think, Crystal, for the larger answer, 98% of the time is highly unlikely. If the housing authority doesn't have the money or the program in place, then it's unlikely they would be willing to assist with 70% of what the cost of that mortgage would be, okay? But I'll do some additional checking when I get ready to make this next video to see if there are any other alternatives available potentially to you, okay? Well, guys, enjoy your morning, and you guys out in Philly, enjoy. Those of you that have managed to get the cash assistance, the payment, and debit card, try to use that responsibly. Your actions are going to speak volumes to the rest of the 2 million people have vouchers, and the way that you treat that program and the outcome of it, you guys actually are going to determine how well, and that's the same thing goes for Riverside and a few other counties in California. The way you guys treat the cash program is going to determine whether or not this moves forward. So I'm praying that they pick the right people for this, because I get as many nefarious people as I do good ones that even reach out to our office, and I'm a bit concerned that people use this money for the wrong shit. And so I hope there's some oversight. I don't like any cash program where they simply tell people to do whatever they want with it, because that's also suggesting that people are giving away money through the city and taxpayers simply for people to do what the hell they want to do. That should never be permitted, ever. There should always be checks and balances in anything that we deal with in this country, especially when it's not your money. Okay, I'm not saying that we should indenture people with the payment, but to simply hand out money for no good fucking reason doesn't work for me. There needs to be checks and balances. So I'm hoping that Philly and those counties in California, the people that were lucky enough to be able to participate in cash assistance, use that in an appropriate manner to set an example for all the other 2 million people that could potentially benefit from this program. All right, guys, this will be the last time I say bye, but we'll see you guys tomorrow around 10 a.m. Central Standard Texas time. Bye-bye for now.